Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of the Stephen King podcast. This is bonus episode number 33, and today I have with me writer, podcaster, coach, and speaker, Daniel Willcocks. Hello, Daniel. How are you doing?
Hey, Lou. Thanks for having me. I'm doing really well, thank you. How are you?
Not bad. Not bad at all. We're both enjoying the change in seasons. Warm weather is starting to come here in Canada and over where you are in the UK. So that's great.
It is lush. I've had the window open, which is a rarity in the UK at this time of year. So it's been a good day.
Very cool. Okay. I have to ask, because I'm looking at your author photo on your website and you're standing in a woods. Where was that taken? Do you mind?
That was actually behind the back of my old house. I moved from that place in December, but it was beautiful because the house itself literally backed onto a forest. So it was probably about 20 foot of garden. And then there were deer out there sometimes, squirrels. It was beautiful. And then, we just went out into the woods with the photographer, set off some smoke bombs, like controlled, I'll add, controlled.
Right.
And just got some sort of gritty pictures for some of the horror stuff that I do.
Oh, yeah. Very atmospheric. Very cool.
Thank you.
All right. So you're here to talk about your latest book, which is Winter Comes, episode 6. But before we get into that, let's dive a little bit into your background and how you came to be doing what you're doing.
Perfect. So I started writing in 2015. I basically spent a few years as a editor and proofreader for nonfiction works and got into a position in which I got bored of reading, well, not so much bored, but just a bit tired of reading other people's work and felt the sort of pull to write my own stuff. And it was around that time that I stumbled across Amazon's KDP and saw that, you can get your own books onto the Amazon bookshelves. And this amazed me. Because someone working within just publishing, I guess more the traditional side, like I said, it was more nonfiction text. So I wasn't so much in with all the printing presses of like HarperCollins and Penguin and that lot. But to know that I could just put something online and have it published on the Amazon store was kind of big. So I trialed it with a play script that I'd written back in my university days. And a couple of weeks later, I had this physical paperback version of a play that I'd written. And I was like, okay, there's something cool here. So I then proceeded to... I had, pockets of time here and there around sort of looking after a new child. And I don't know, do you have kids yourself?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if you went through the same thing, but when the first kid's born particularly, you get that sort of wave of, I'm going to make myself a better human. I'm going to finally live my dreams and do the things I wanted to do. So right. I kind of put my hand into writing short stories. And it just so happened around that time that a friend gave me a copy of Stephen King's Everything's Eventual, which is his short story collection. Fantastic book.
Right.
And I thought I'd try my hand at writing some horror. So I wrote a horror novella called Sins of Smoke and put that through Amazon KDP, held the physical copy in my hands and was like, this is kind of awesome. And then over the next week or so, that proceeded to rise in the charts and got to a position in which it was number 1 in the horror charts over the Halloween period.
Cool.
So I was like, okay, I must have done something right there. And then everything pretty much spiraled from that moment. I mean, to give you the brief synopsis, I started interacting with a group of other writers and we formed a story studio called Hawk and Cleaver. We started a horror thriller sci-fi podcast, which is 20 minutes of fiction that gets released every Monday that we started in 2016. And that since has accrued about 7 million downloads over the different stories. And then just woven between that is the story of someone who's been working full-time in marketing, got to the point in which I could eventually take my fiction to full-time. And now I write horror, I ghostwrite for clients, I help other authors to publish their books as a book coach. And I'm a speaker as well and a podcaster. So that's kind of a whistle-stop tour of that journey.
Wow. You're a one-stop shop of...
I like doing things.
Yeah, it sounds like you do. That's very impressive. Let's dive a little back in time now. So when you were growing up, were you an avid reader?
I was, yes. In my household, definitely. I've got a brother who to this day has never read a book, which I find absolutely incredible. But I'd read sort of, your traditional Roald Dahls, your Harry Potters when I was growing up, and that tackled like the Lord of the Rings and sort of the books that you kind of expect. I went through Goosebumps phase as a kid, but it wasn't really until around, I must have been 16 or 17, that I borrowed Cujo from the local library. And blew me away. Just I didn't realize that prose could be that rich, that sort of just the narrative could be so well crafted and really bring you into this world.
Right.
And then from there, I kind of read on for a lot of horror. But yeah, even as a kid, I was reading a lot.
Mm. That's interesting that you picked Cujo, because that's a book that King has gone on record as saying he doesn't really remember writing.
Yes, because he was high off his... Yeah.
So if you were impressed with that book, I'm sure you must have found the other ones even more impressive.
Yeah, it's weird because there's just part of you where you go, is it better because he wasn't lucid?
Right.
Or are the others better because he was? But yeah, I think, I don't know if it was anything that I could tell from the writing at the time, but I think sort of when you consider him going into Cujo's head, and particularly the opening chapter where he's talking about what is essentially the monster in the closet.
Yep.
I think you can kind of get elements of where he might have been going there.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's King's strength, like the monster in the closet. Everybody goes through that phase in their life, right? And he's able to tap into these things that are common, are universal. And, he
has a real knack with writing children.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is, but just creating that atmosphere around what it feels like to be a kid.
Yep.
And there's only one other author that I know of that I've read that I kind of feel hits that perfectly as well, which is Robert McCammon.
Nice.
Yeah,
yes.
Particularly in A Boy's Life, that book just blew me away, just with how it felt atmospherically.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, both great writers. I really like both of them.
Yes.
So it sounds like in your education that you were into the writing field in some respect, more on the business publishing side, or?
Yeah, it was. I kind of spilled into it.
Okay.
I mean, I've always enjoyed reading, and there was always a part of me that enjoyed the process of writing, particularly as a kid. But I can't really go on record and say that I was ever one of those people that dreamed of being a writer from day one. It was not something that everyone at any point would be like, oh, it would be nice to be a writer. I was definitely there. But my life span in a load of different directions. I went to university and I did English and drama, but the intention was to come out of that trained as an English teacher, just because I liked the idea of teaching. And I had a phenomenal English teacher in my high school. And so I went to university, and then while I was there, that switched into me sort of forming a real obsession with parkour and free running. And I actually, throughout my 3 years of university, ended up running the Parkour Society. I became a parkour coach. I used to travel around locally and teach people how to sort of jump and flip and vault things safely. Which is always fun when you're teaching 6-year-olds how to bring it back a little bit. And I left university thinking that's what I was going to do. I set up the business. I was, successful coaching different places and built that business up, and then suffered an injury about 2 years after that. And I got into a position where I thought, what can I do that isn't going to physically endanger my body anymore, but that also uses the stuff that I've done before. And it just so happened that my partner at the time, her mother worked within the proofreading and the copy editing industry and managed to kind of hook me in. I wouldn't say as an apprentice, but she definitely trained me and started to coax me towards that way. And I found myself just getting fascinated by just the process of publishing. So, what happens after the writer of any genre, any sort of medium writes those words? Where does it go from there? And sort of tracking that progress, the communication between the author and the editor, when agents get involved, that kind of thing. And it was all freelance. I wasn't sort of employed by any main organization.
Right.
But then I took that and managed to get myself an internship at the University of Lincoln in the UK in their publications team. And then just from there kind of really got to grips with copywriting and writing to particular audiences, proofreading, the different styles of publication that they deal with, working with designers, and got a real behind the scenes of, the full scope of what publishing is. And that definitely has paid back dividends, particularly when it comes to self-publishing my work, because none of my books are traditionally published. I've got a few deals with, I don't know, you could call them sort of small publishing houses, but most of my works are self-published. And obviously having that full scope of how it works has been really useful, making sure that I'm consistent, I can brand my books, and I can deliver them in a way that they feel professional, even though they're self-published. Right.
Interesting, because you were well positioned to strike it on your own. That is for sure. And even in just the last 5 years, 6 years since you published your first novella, the publishing industry has changed dramatically. The last 10 years, it's unbelievable. But the last 5 years, even it's continuing to evolve. And it's really hard, I think, for writers to keep track of what's the best way to get their book published nowadays. So I'm sure that your experience and services would be very helpful to a lot of writers.
Yeah, I mean, particularly, like I say, I consider myself very well versed in the process of self-publishing.
Mm-hmm.
I do have my weak points, as does everyone. I still think there's a lot that I could do to improve, how I market books, how I play with sort of paid advertising and things to get my books into the hands of more readers.
Right.
But I'm also very, very fascinated by the process of traditional publishing still, because like you say, a lot has changed over the last decade, let alone the last half a decade since I've been in this industry as well. And it's still really, really interesting to see fresh-faced writers coming into the business, writing their book, and then automatically defaulting to the traditional publishing model.
Mm-hmm.
And, it has its bonuses. Of course, there are still reasons why you would do that.
Right.
But a lot of the leverage that traditional publishing houses had isn't as strong as it used to be. They can still offer you, they can still market your book to a whole horde of readers. They've still got all the channels to physical copies within bookstores and things. And I think that's really their sort of USP.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still stories of people that are working with traditional publishers now where, it used to be that you hand your book over and they do all the work.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's a lot more that they look for people or they can favor people who have bigger audiences already, because then they know they're going to be making those sales. They want to guarantee that income. So there's a lot that I'd like to explore and find out within the traditional publishing industry itself. And I do have, I wouldn't say plans in the immediate future, but I do have the want to go through that avenue to see if I can get a book traditionally published and to see what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when it comes to self-publishing, I have enough of a rounded experience to know the mechanics of getting started to getting that book published and then the full cycle of publishing. And I have actually, as of today, finished the first draft of a nonfiction book that I'm working on called The Self-Publishing Blueprint, which is literally this entire process laid out for people who are interested in just getting their books out onto the shelves and what the stepping stones look like.
Right. Okay, so let's take a look at your library of books here. And my goodness, for 5 years, you've got, 30 plus books here? I'm just like...
There's a fair few, yeah.
Yeah, so which one do you want to tackle first? Do you want to talk about your latest one, or do you want to sort of just give an overview of everything that you've done?
I'm not sure. Let's start with the latest one.
Okay,
and go from there. So,
okay.
So Winter Comes is episode 6 of the When Winter Comes series. And it was experimental in writing. It was, I wanted to approach the old serial format when it came to horror, because it felt to me like years since anyone had really kind of cracked into that type of story,
right? Where
you deliver sort of chunks of a story a bit at a time. And particularly with how my writing schedule was last year and other things I was working on, I didn't have time really to commit to a full novel in one go.
Okay.
So I had this story. It had been brewing since 2015. And I'd actually sat down to try and write it in 2017, and it felt too big for me, or I hadn't quite crafted it yet.
Right.
And then at the beginning of last year, it kind of fell into place. So I put my fingers to the keyboard and told the story of essentially an isolated fictional town up in the northern reaches of Alaska.
Oh, okay.
Which comes under attack by a blizzard that covers the entire town in snow, and also gets overtaken by a group of Wendigo. And it kind of tells the story of the survival of a number of different characters within that town, and explores the story of, what brought them there. There's elements of paranormal. There's obviously apocalyptic threat in there. And it was just fun to play with a group of different characters to see how I could interplay their stories and bring them all together.
Very cool. Yeah, serialized fiction, of course, this goes right back to Dickens. And even Stephen King had to play with it with The Green Mile. So it's definitely an interesting format to play with. And I'm curious then with your writing process for this, because are you by nature, are you a plotter or a pantser?
I would say that if there was a spectrum of, pantser is 1 and plotter is 10, I'm probably around a 3 or a 4.
Okay.
I like to know roughly what the end's going to bring. I like to know what the threat is, but then I much prefer just trying to see what the characters do to get there.
Okay. And because this is a serialized story, did you ever paint yourself into a corner? Or did you have an end in mind for the serial?
I had an end in mind. I didn't know how many stories or how many episodes it was going to take to get there. I thought in the beginning it would be 7 or 8, and it turned out to be 6. And I would say that in terms of any kind of corners or anything, there is one character, I won't name who and I won't say what, for fear of spoilers. But there is one character at the end who, in the first draft that I originally gave to my beta readers, he had one particular plotline, and then in the actual rewrite before I put it out to sort of the wider public, I switched what happens to them. So there was a bit of a switch there, and there was only one moment where, because I've got essentially 4 main perspectives throughout the book.
Okay.
And there was only one moment where I started to add in a character. He was going to be a policeman who was sort of trying to deal with it all by himself because it's late at night, or the other forces are sort of, distracted or asleep or whatever.
Right.
And I think I got about 3,000 words into his journey, then just went, this is too much to keep a hold of everything. It's like, I think 4 was okay, but 5 was just a bit of a stretch too far. So that was the only stuff that I really sort of trimmed out or pulled away from.
Okay. How long did it take you from the first book to the last book?
So the first book I finished in, I want to say April. And then the final book I finished in October because it was released in November. So it was a 1 a month deal. It was very quick fire.
Right. Write
this, get it edited, and then straight out. Because the books are about 20,000 words each. It's about 100 pages or so. So
right.
It was manageable-ish within that time. But yeah, I did move quite quickly with that project.
Okay. And now on the more day-to-day things, so you're writing these books and you're doing all these other activities. How do you schedule your workday?
Poorly. To be honest. Yeah, I mean, I've played around a lot with it because I went full-time as an author about 2 years, coming up to my 2-year anniversary now. And a lot of my work has changed from project to project, so it depends what I'm in at the time. And like I say, I ghostwrite as well, and I ghostwrite quite a lot for other clients. So it was managing my writing around that. So I went through spells of writing the client work in the morning and then working on my work in the afternoon. But I did find that I work best when I can just focus on one project at a time.
Right.
So I would tend to structure my days to focus on the core part of my writing from, I get up between 6 and half 6 and get straight to the keyboard. And then the first thing I do is lay at least sort of 500 to 1,000 words before I, have breakfast, shower, go for a walk, whatever it is that I do before work, quote, officially starts. And then, I'll spend the rest of the morning just mostly focusing on creative stuff because I have found that is just when I get the most done.
Right.
And then afternoon generally left to, if I'm podcasting, if I've got sort of admin, if I'm doing coaching work. So that kind of is the general structure of my days. It doesn't always pan out like that.
Right.
But as much as I want it to, it does. And then, like I say, if I can't, I try not to work on 2 fiction projects at once if I can help it. So I'll try to squeeze as much of my own work into a couple of days a week if I can.
Right.
And then the rest of the week will be to the other stuff.
Okay. So you finished this series now. What are you looking at doing in the future?
So I've got a number of projects on the go at the minute. So the 6 episodes themselves, I'm currently working on a box set that's going to tie them all together. I've got a brand new cover for that. It's going to be a beautiful hardback collector's edition that I'm very excited for. I'm currently also working on a novella, a horror novella, which I'm not sure how long it's going to be yet, but it's basically just it's just for me, that one. I'm going to see if I can potentially pitch that out to some small presses to work on. I'm doing a collaboration at the minute with a friend writing a novel, which we're kind of in the very early stages of planning the story for that. And I've also got an anthology through my publishing company, Devil's Rock Publishing, which it's called The Omen's Call, and it's all about omens. It's all about the things that premonition, yeah, all that kind of stuff where it forecasts towards impeding death and doom and gloom. So we're asking for short stories that all fit within that arena. And the submissions for that close on the 28th of this month. So I'm not sure when this is going live, but if anyone does want to get involved, the information is on my website at devilsrockpublishing.com. And so I'll be putting all that together. But yeah, I've got a few other projects as well, but I should probably stop there. Okay.
This should be out before then. It should be out probably within the week. So we'll
Perfect.
Look for it next week, this weekend probably. So you've got a lot on the go. You definitely are a high energy person. I have to say that. And you've got a lot of other books here. I don't know if you want to briefly touch on any of the other ones. Sins of Smoke was your first one, correct?
Yes, Sins of Smoke was the novella that started it all.
Right. Are any of these other series? It looks like one is Dawn of Chaos.
Yeah, so I've got two other series. One of them is The Dawn of Chaos, which is the Caitlin Chronicles series, which is a bit of a genre blend of horror, urban fantasy, a bit of sci-fi in there. And it tells the story of a post-apocalyptic world in which you've got vampires, you've got werewolves, you've got zombies. So it's kind of a mash of everything. And that was a collaboration with Michael Anderley from LMBPM Publishing. And yeah, 5 books in that series. That series itself links in with the larger universe that is his property, which is the Catherian Gambit universe. So that's a lot of fun for people that like a bit of it's much more sarcastic, snarky. It's less heavy than some of the horror stuff that I've written. So it's a bit more fun.
Right.
And then I've got the Rot series that I've written with a friend of mine, Luke Condor.
That's a great series.
Thank
name.
you. Yes.
I like that.
The Rot. So we've got They Rot in that at the minute. We've got They Remain. We're working on the third in that series to sort of wrap up that box set. But that's fun. That's about UK 8 years after a virus has hit. And it was inspired quite heavily from The Last of Us. So it's that kind of vibe with a Brizzy male protagonist. And then, I've got a few sort of short story collections. I've got a number of novellas and anthologies. And that wraps it up. I mean, if people want to see all of my fiction and browse, that's over at danielwillcocks.com/fiction.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I tend to just, I like the dark. I don't know what it is. I just really, really enjoy writing. I like writing stories where humans are stripped bare.
Right.
So all that's left is, what is fundamentally similar between every human. So people don't care how many followers you have on Facebook when you're about to die. Do you know what I mean? So I like writing those stories where you really get to grips with what it is to be human. Yeah. And explore that through horror. So yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, you've got a deep catalog there. I will put up a link in the show notes so that people can check out your website. I noticed that you also have a couple of nonfiction books. You want to talk about those? Yeah,
sure. So as you could probably hear from the books that I do have, I do tend to write with other authors a lot. So at the beginning of last year, I started working on a book that was all about collaboration for authors because, it's not even just writing with other authors. If you're podcasting with other authors, if you're working with cover designers, if you're working with editors, when you work with other authors who are your beta readers, there's lots of touch points where you are actively working with other people. And what I have found is there are a lot of people who do well with it.
Right.
And there are a lot of people that really, really struggle when they get into those relationships. So the book originally was just going to be sort of a number of steps to how you can collaborate successfully with someone. What ended up happening was the first section, which is all about laying the groundwork, making the right foundations for a collaborative partnership, just grew and grew and grew because so much of the onus of a good collaboration is in that initial discussion. It's being honest and it's making sure your goals align and that you know what you're working on. So I kind of went really in depth with what you should do before you actually sign any agreement or before you start working on anything, just to make those collaborations work more effectively. I've got a nonfiction, which I did in collaboration with Jay Thorne, which is all about 9 things career authors don't do. And that's all about sort of marketing. And then I've got, as I mentioned, I've got a self-publishing blueprint that will be coming out in the next couple of months. And I'm also working on a book, which is all about productivity for authors. So yeah, I quite enjoy, I didn't think that I'd get into nonfiction. And I was actually quite hesitant to dive into that arena.
Right.
But I started a podcast with Sasha Black last year around March, April time, in which she writes a lot of nonfiction and does quite well with that. And she writes fiction as well. And it just changed my mind because I kind of figured that, all of these subjects are covered already. There's no need for my voice to be in the game. But there's something really therapeutic about just, writing your process and sharing that with people. And hopefully how you've put something will resonate more clearly with someone than they might read elsewhere. So it's, I kind of just got bit by the bug last year and now I've got a few more on the way.
Right. Very good. Speaking of voices, I'm curious, given your portfolio, are you looking at or have you done audiobooks of any of your books? Because that's a big market apparently nowadays.
Yeah, I've got the Caitlin Chronicles is an audiobook, as is the first book in the Rot series. We've got book 2 of the Rot in production.
Okay.
And that kind of covers it. It is something that I'm actively looking at developing to make sure all of my books, well, particularly the ones that are of a decent length, are within audio book as well, because I know that, like you say, it's a growing market, and it's. I do have a lot of readers that sometimes reach out to me and say, "Is it available in audio?" Because either they've got problems with their eyes, or there are barriers to them reading books. I haven't gone down the avenue of narrating my own audiobooks yet. I probably will for my nonfiction.
Okay.
But it's just finding the time to make that happen.
Right. And so with your Winter Come series, which you're going to do a box set with, are you going to then do an audiobook of the whole series?
Yes. I've got a narrator lined up ready for that.
Awesome.
So just got to get the final edits done and then put that in his hands.
Very good. I'm just curious now, a little more on the technical side of things. What do you use for writing your works with? Are you just a Word guy, or do you use Scrivener? Or
yeah, I start with Scrivener. And then once I'm happy with the layout of the book and sort of how it looks visually, because obviously you can move the boards and stuff around, I then copy all of that over into Word, and then Word's my editing tool.
Okay.
And then once I'm done with Word and I'm happy with how that looks, I then format it through Vellum for my editor to look at in like a neat PDF file or something. So I use sort of a number of those tools to get there.
Oh, very cool. Okay. This is a question I ask all the people I'm interviewing, because we've been living through very, very unique times. 2020 is probably going to go down as one of the worst years since probably the Spanish flu back in the early 1900s there. How have you dealt with COVID? It sounds like you've trucked ahead pretty good, because you have a lot of energy and you have a lot of things going on.
I used my work as just fuel to keep on going. It probably wasn't the healthiest way to do it, but back in my old house, I lived alone, and a lot of that, obviously through the pandemic, you couldn't see too many people. So I just used that time to get stuff done. Okay. There were obviously days in which the energy doesn't come, and it has been difficult, and it has taken a toll mentally in terms of just getting stuff done. And I think the hardest part has been feeling like you should be getting more stuff done, but then realizing it's only after you really think and remember that you're in a pandemic that you suddenly go, oh, that's the reason why a lot of this is quite difficult. Right. But yeah, I think in terms of how I work, it hasn't changed that at all. Obviously, as writers, we're in front of the computer a lot of the time anyway, so I'd be here anyway. Right. But sort of mentally, it has been a bit more difficult, and I have done a lot, but at the same time, I burned myself out a lot. So I've not balanced it well. I just my attitude is kind of, if I'm stuck at home anyway, I might as well do something productive with it. Right. And that does then make it quite difficult to decompress and chill out the other time. So there have been a few days in a row in which I've just fully crashed and gone, okay, nothing for 3 days because my body's telling me to stop. Right. And in terms of COVID itself, has that or is that going to ever play a part in any of your stories, or are you just going to pretend it never happened? Or because I know most of your stuff is not in the today and now kind of scenarios, but as a horror writer, I think that you and probably a lot of other horror writers are looking at this and saying, wow, this is really great material for this kind of story or whatever. Yeah. I mean, there is an element of that. When the pandemic first hit, I actually follow a post-apocalyptic author, and I hope he doesn't mind me naming him out, but called Brian Casey, and I follow his newsletter. And his brand new series was particularly about a virus similar to COVID. And I remember a week into the pandemic getting this email going, I'm really sorry. Like, I hope this doesn't offend people, but this was planned to publish anyway. So, it's there if you want it. If not, I fully understand. But yeah, I don't know. I've thought about it in terms of having characters wear masks, or just that being an element of the book. But I don't know yet. Potentially. Right. I think it's given a lot of real world inspiration in terms of seeing how people react to the pandemic, and do people listen? Like, what are the contributing factors? Because obviously, and I won't say in terms of like what I believe is right or wrong with the pandemic, but when it comes to governmental response from across the world, there have been serious sort of lacks in some areas. Some places have gone really, really overly tight, and I don't know. It helps inform what you could write about if that scenario was to become a thing. And with The Rot, I do have an idea of a side series to potentially explore in that, where it goes more into how The Rot came to be, and it could inform some of that. Who knows? Yeah. But yeah, no immediate plans. Yeah, I think if we all get a little bit of distance, especially writers, this whole pandemic was a really interesting broad spectrum of
human behavior. And
Yes.
there's a lot of fertile ground in there. And it blows me away even more now that Stephen King foresaw this 40 years ago with The Stand. I mean, like it's unbelievable. And it's kind of weird that it's called COVID-19, because if anybody knows Stephen King, they know that 19 is a big number in his mythology. So, I think that is a lesson that writers, like Stephen King, is a noticer of human behavior. And if you can tap into that and see something that's going on and write about it before it actually happens, that really, that's the ticket for a writer, I think. But
yeah, I remember reading that book and thinking, oh, people wouldn't be that stupid.
Yeah, but now you read passages out of that book and it goes, yeah, I just saw this on the news today.
Absolutely.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that covers everything I had to ask you. Is there anything that hasn't come up over the course of the interview, Daniel, that you would like to mention at this time?
Yeah. I mean, like we've spoken about, I've got my books out there. I'm doing stuff to help authors, looking at some stuff as well somewhere down the line to specifically help horror authors with some of the fundamentals of craft when it comes to horror. But no, I mean, other than that, I've got my book coaching services. If people are interested in finding out more about me, or even just the stuff I can do to help you as an author,
right, then
that's all over on my website. That's been quite an experience to get into, because I've been book coaching for about coming up to 5 or 6 months now. And it's very, very enlightening to see some of the sort of struggles that people are going through, particularly in 2020 and 2021 when it comes to writing their first book.
Right.
And for people, just to give a very, very brief overview of what a book coach does, just consider it as almost a personal trainer to the gym, but instead to your writing. So what I do is I work directly with the author to talk through their story. I help them with any of the process of, any of the blocks when it comes to what should they be doing next, what tools are out there to help an author market, all those kind of things that you might be unaware of as a first-time author. Right. I'm basically side by side with authors, helping them get over those hurdles and saving them hours and hours of time with researching, jumping on courses, going to conferences, and just trying to make it easiher. But that's been a sort of really rewarding sidestep that I've jumped into in the last sort of half a year or so.
Right. And that's particularly suited for this environment where I assume that you would be doing this mostly remotely anyhow, regardless of the circumstances.
It's pretty much all through Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you much of a conference or convention goer before the pandemic, or?
I'd only just started, really. I went to one in 2018. I went to one in 2019. I was due to go to Vegas for a conference last year, which all went tits up. But yeah, no, I think you get a lot of useful stuff from them. I think mostly for me, it's the networking rather than the content of the presentations. Not that they're not great, but it's definitely sort of the connections that you make.
Yes.
But they can also be exhausting as well.
Yeah.
Very intense for a weekend conference.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, it's been a blast talking to you. I thank you for taking the time to come on the show. And as I said, I'll probably have this out in a week or so, since we're recording this on the 9th. It should be up on the weekend so that it will still be timely for the anthology. It's the anthology that you're putting together, right? For the 28th? Yes. Okay. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really, really fun.
Very good. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.